Hi, I'm Brett. This is a Kick in the Grass Football Manager story, and today we're talking tactics. So what I've done is gone onto the FM Base website and I've had a look at the top 10 tactics. I've collected data on the positions, the shape, the roles, the duties, and the team instructions of each of those top 10 tactics. So the reason I've done this is to see if there are any trends or patterns that might not only help me make some tactics, but for anyone else out there that's looking to try their hand at coming up with tactics, maybe for the first time, or you just want to see what the meta is or what really works in the FM game engine, then this might be of interest to you. Now, I just wanted to say this isn't going to be a definitive list of what you must do to make great tactics for FM22. These are plug and play tactics off FM Base. They don't take into consideration the opposition you're playing, whether you're home or away, or any switches you need to make mid-game. It might just help you out to see what actually works in those plug and play tactics. I'm just going to go through the top 10 tactics quickly so you can get a brief understanding of what they look like. I'm not going to go through them in detail. I will give you my analysis at the end and hopefully you can take something from that. So this one's number 10. This is the custom 1.3 standard. On FM Base, it's called the Attacking 4-2-3-1 with Striker Focus version 2. This is the number 9 tactic, the Leo PFV. Obviously a little bit different, very heavy up in the attacking here. Giant gap through the midfield there. At number 8, we have the Zaz Blue 4.0. Zaz actually makes a heap of those tactics you'll see on FM Base, and some of the ones you'll see further up the list are tweaks of some of Zaz's other tactics. At number 7, this is the Promise 9 Positive Tiki-Taka tweak tactic. This is actually the only asymmetric one on the list. At number 6 was another Zaz tactic, the Green 5.0. At number 5 was the Positive 4-3-3 Narrow. This is the Counter Loner Car Can't Dance, which I've seen a few people online use pretty heavily. Coming in at number 4 is Hiding in the Shadows. Pretty apt name with 3 Shadow Strikers. Number 3 was the Diamond Destroyer. This is a riff on a Zaz Blue DM tactic. Number 2 is the Stephen HK Shaolin 4-3-3 version 2 tactic. And coming in at number 1 is the 4141 Goal Machine 22.3. And this is a tweak of Zaz's Blue 4.0 tactic. Talking about the positions that were used in the top 10 tactics, there were clearly some that were used way more than others. I'm just going to run through those now. This is not a real tactic, it's just an example of those positions on each line of the pitch that were clearly the most popular. So up in the striking position, advanced forward was used in 8 out of the 10 tactics. In the attacking midfield position, Shadow Striker was used in 6 of the 10 tactics. In the centre of midfield, we already know it's quite popular from watching other tactics videos. Central midfield was pretty popular, but this was the least popular, or the position where there wasn't any particular role that was overused. Central midfield was used in 4 out of the 10 tactics, so not that prominent, and many different roles were used here. In the defensive midfield spot, 6 of the 10 tactics used a roaming playmaker. Going into the defense, inverted wingbacks were really popular. 7 of the 10 tactics used them. And ball-playing defenders were used by every single tactic, which I found quite interesting. The other thing that was used in every single tactic was a sweeper keeper. Talking about the player instructions, specific player instructions, I'm going to use the centre midfield as an example of what was probably the most popular things to use. Now, this is not 100%, but nearly every position in, I would say, 80% of the tactics had nearly all of these things ticked on the player instructions. Now, some of these are hardwired into positions, so they wouldn't need to be selected. But what I found was tackle harder was pretty much always ticked. Dribble more was always ticked. Shoot less often. And take more risks was nearly selected, if it wasn't already hardwired, in every single position, except for the sweeper keeper. But all the way from defense to attack, every position pretty much seemed to use those 4 selections as player instructions pretty prominently. Of course, there were other things used as well. There were positions using stay wider, move into channels. We'll talk a bit more about those later on. As far as instructions for the central defenders, our ball-playing defenders, which every single tactic used, they had those same things selected: tackle harder, dribble more, shoot less often, but nearly all of them as well had stay wider, which I also found quite interesting. Okay, moving away from player positions and their particular instructions and talking about how the team tactics work. On the left here is all of those extra team instructions that I've put in. And I would say this is kind of pretty much the same in nearly all the tactics, with a few little tweaks here and there. I'll run you through those and let you know how many of the tactics used each. So as far as mentality, 7 out of the 10 tactics used a positive mentality, and the other 3 used an attacking mentality. In possession, play out of defense was used in 9 of the 10 tactics. Low crosses was used in every single tactic. Work ball into box was used in 9 of 10 tactics. And having an extremely high tempo was used in 8 of 10 of those tactics. In transition, every single tactic used counter press and counter, and 8 of the 10 tactics used the distribution as roll it out. When setting the instructions for out of possession, the defensive width was set to standard for half the tactics, and the other half used force opposition outside. Much higher line of engagement was the most popular, with that being used in 8 of the 10 tactics. The trigger press was set to much more often in 9 of the 10 tactics, so nearly every single one, and every tactic used prevent short goalkeeper distribution. And the offside trap was used in 9 of 10 tactics, so nearly every time as well. Now I'm just having a bit of fun here, and I have made a meta tactic. It's pretty close to the Zaz Blue 4.0, which seemed to have most of the really popular instructions and player roles. So I've got 2 advanced forwards, and they have the same instructions. I have inverted wingers, would take more risks, shoot less often, and tackle harder. I have that shadow striker, which was really popular. I have a roaming playmaker, because in the tactics that had inverted wingbacks, they always had one pretty much. I've got those inverted wingbacks on both sides of defense, and in the center of defense, I have the ball-playing defenders with the dribble more, shoot less, tackle harder, and also the stay wider, and that sweeper keeper on support. Obviously, this tactic here is just a bit of fun. It probably will work, especially with all those team instructions and the player instructions set as they are. And hopefully you can play around with that and use some of those patterns and hints and tips, I suppose, that we've come up with today. I'm going to run you through now some of the analysis that I made after collecting all the data and comparing those 10 tactics. I found that no tactic had the same midfield and striker setup. Every single one of them was different in some way. So what that tells me is you keep your defense pretty stock standard with 4 at the back and you can really mix up the roles and positions forward of defence in those defensive midfield all the way up to striker positions. Talking about back fours, every single tactic had a back four. Not 3 central defenders, nothing extra, just a back four. Interestingly, 7 out of the 10 tactics had either a defensive midfielder or a central midfielder using the player instruction of move into channels. The only attacking midfield central position that was actually used was shadow striker whenever that was used in any of the top 10 tactics. As far as player duties are concerned, and generally this means a player is given an attack duty, support duty, or defensive duty. 9 of the 10 tactics had either 5 or 6 players on attack duty. So at least half the team. In 7 of the 10 tactics, 2 players were on defensive duty, and this was most likely to be the 2 central defenders, with all the other positions being on support duty. In the midfield, it was really interesting. Half the tactics had wide midfielders, and half had all the play going through the centre of midfield. Now, I said before that the most prominent position as a striker was advanced forward. Any of the tactics that had a striker that was not an advanced forward, every single time, that striker was on a support duty. Of the 7 tactics that used inverted wing backs, 6 of those 7 used a roaming playmaker in the defensive midfield role just ahead of the central defenders. And that roaming playmaker, in each of those times, had the moves into channels player instruction. Continuing to talk about defense, every single tactic had both the defensive right and defensive left on an attack duty in every single tactic. That brings to an end my analysis of the top 10 tactics currently on FM Base. Hopefully you found it interesting, and it might even help you set up your next tactic. Huge shout out to FM Base for what they provide, and all the people that send in tactics to be tested. If you like what I do, please subscribe and hit a like on this video. Thank you very much. I'm Brett. Bye.